everybody, welcome to the TRICHOMES Hash It Out podcast. I am your host, RJ Balde. On this show, we feature conversations about trending cannabis topics. We also bring in industry insiders and influencers to discuss their point of view. In this episode, I'll be talking to Dr. Peter Huson about providing innovative business solutions for cannabis companies. We'll also talk about his event company and how they're handling the pandemic and more. Without further ado, it's time to hash it out. My guest today is the Chief of Operations at Backbone, a supply chain management platform for cannabis businesses. Welcome to the show, Peter Huson.
What's up? I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no worries. Now, I was going to say thank you for sitting down with me today, but I understand you're standing up. You got the blood moving. I appreciate that. I like a mobile atmosphere. Yeah, you got to keep it loose. That's what's up. Now, where are you joining us virtually from today?
Petaluma, California, a little south of Santa Rosa, a little north of San Francisco. 2 hours from the Emerald Triangle.
Okay, I dig it. And are you originally from there? Is that your home base?
I'm originally from this area. I have, I would say that a lot of why I'm here today involves Emerald Triangle and learning the biz and kind of getting things underway for folks up there.
I dig it. And how has your year been overall, man? I know that's a loaded question. Usually that's kind of a throwaway, but right. This year it's got a little more weight to it.
Yeah, man. I put it this way. My wife was 4 months pregnant when COVID hit. So I've been under like extreme, super extra lockdown for a lot of that time.
Yeah.
So ultimately just been, getting through it. Fortunate enough to be working in technology and be working remote from the get-go. Got a lot of friends. A lot of this came from being in the music industry. And so I got a lot of folks in the entertainment industry who've been hit the hardest by COVID, I would say. So it's been a roller coaster. Again, blessed and grateful for being able to continue the work that we've been doing. And also that, cannabis has been declared an essential business and has been able to rock it through it. So, lots of thanks to give there. And, a lot of people haven't had it that way. So just continue to push along and see where we can help folks out.
What was that process for you like back in, I guess it was March? All the months blend together. Imagine March is already like 3-4 months away again. But anyway.
I said to myself yesterday, I was like, when they said summer for vaccines for folks, I was like,
yeah,
whoa, like we're halfway there. I was like, wait a minute. No, we're like almost 9 months in. Like, yeah. Holy, like this.
Weird.
I don't know. In the transition, right, from like, I remember those first few days almost like, almost getting gloves on, like a hazmat suit going outside. Now it's like, all right, I got my mask, I got my sanitizer, like we're good.
Yeah, totally. And what was it like that? There was that weird period where, when lockdowns first started ramping up and we were in the process of declaring which businesses were essential and which businesses had to close. And cannabis was really like on that gray area where, some places were a little early to declare it essential. There were places like Colorado where like they did that thing where like all cannabis businesses had to close at a certain time, and then everyone complained about it and they were like, okay, just kidding. Like you can get your cannabis and your alcohol, like it's all good. What was that like early day of the pandemic, that early age of the pandemic for you? What was that like?
Well, I got an interesting story on that. I was actually very early. It was end of February. I was actually presenting Backbone to the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda. Literally bumping elbows at that time because people had just started. I don't know if there's some videos on there where actually people in the Caribbean, they're just touching feet. Right?
Wow.
And that was like the beginning. I just remember, my wife was pregnant at the time. So she laced me up with some masks and some sanitizer. All her mom friends were already getting ready for this and kind of, especially people pregnant, like were very, very like early on. I remember getting into Miami, kind of leaving the island because they had the first case there. And I left the island got to Miami, and I was like, I was looking, and I was thinking of the dirtiest places in the world, and where all of people is the passport, where you scan your passport, and every single person in the country is going through there.
Right.
There's no wipes, no nothing, right? It was very early on, and people were just touching over and over again. I was
Right.
like one of the only people in a mask in that line in Miami. It was I just remember that kind of feeling like, whoa, I'm the like outcast, like here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, yeah, man, I mean, here's the thing, right? If you think like we're really focused on everything up to retail here at Backbone. And so the essential business was really the rest of the supply chain. And if you kind of like, we've been in part of this kind of transition to legalization here in California the entire time. We talked to the kind of California Department of Public Health. They really do a lot of manufacturing. And if you really look at what people are doing now in cannabis facilities, they're wearing gloves everywhere. They're wearing masks, especially you're making things like ingestibles and edibles and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like COVID actually enforced the things that people were already supposed to be doing for cleanly behaviors in the creating cannabis.
Right. Right.
Way. So put it this way, there's all of a sudden there's a lot of beard nets and PPE on the inventory items in our system.
Yeah, yeah, which I'm not complaining about, as someone who enjoys a good facial hair grow. Like I love it. I love the expression, but I would appreciate it if we lessen the chance of getting those beard hairs in my flower. That would be great.
And that's the thing, right? If you, again, not trying to be a positivity bully here, but if you wanted to kind of look at that in perspective, like it has cleaned up the cannabis industry in the sense of just making sure everyone recognizing, because look, all of this has been made in garages and over the time in history, right? And getting used to legalization was also getting used to sanitation, right? When you're creating these items. So I think there's been a big shift in a positive direction for cannabis, and that everyone, yes, in general, we all are clean, wash our hands more often. But I think specifically because cannabis is kind of evolved and is not coming from classic pharma and all of these places where in food industry where you have to be that clean. I think CDPH and a lot of these industries they haven't come down as hard as they had to. And this is kind of allowed naturally almost for folks to just, I don't know, be a little more sanitary in their facilities.
Yeah, totally. I think it has, I appreciate you looking on the bright side of it, because I think there are, as we hopefully see the light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to this pandemic, I hope that there are like certain things that we can like sort of continue in terms of hygiene.
Yep.
Like when the CDC was recommending, make sure you wash your hands for 20 seconds, make sure you get under your fingernails and all that. And people were like, damn, like that seems so like that seems so extra to like 20 seconds washing your hands, like paying so much attention. And I was kind of like, well, I mean, like, don't you wash your hands anyway? Like, didn't your
my wife was like, I told you so.
Yeah. Like under the fingernails, like that was something that like my mom would tell me about that, like back in the day. Or even like washing like produce or like sanitizing produce. Like that was something my parents would always try to get us to do. And I would just kind of like skimp on it because I would be like, that's like 15 seconds of my time that I could spend eating the apple.
Right.
No,
and I mean, God, dude, from, you think about too, right? Even on the business side, right? How much business was done on, just handshakes, right? And even handshakes are like, how many handshakes did you give a day that you had no idea? And if everyone who was washing their hands on that side. And you know what, to kind of answer the other big thing that I've really noticed, especially as people have shifted to remote during COVID, the one thing that I got to say that's really kind of, I think, affected has been the ability to do whiteboard sessions, right? Like solve problems together in the same room together, right? Because right now, yes, you can kind of do it with some things, but I really miss that chance, because now it feels like, yes, you're solving it with you on the other side of the camera, but still when I kind of leave that, I'm still trying to write it down. Kind of a lot of people are solving problems by themselves in a way. And so that's one thing in a team environment I really miss, is just that ability to say, look, we're going to stand in the same room. We're going to draw this out and we're going to figure this out together. Yep. Just something, it's a small thing, but I feel that's been a big one that I've noticed we don't have the ability to do.
Totally. Yeah. That, the feeling of just having other people in the room with you in a collaborative process. Like there is certainly something that gets lost in the digital translation. You can't really, you can't really convert that mixture of energy and that mixture of aura and perspectives, you know, that gets lost in the ones and zeros for sure.
So yeah, I mean but you know, like you said, as we move forward, I think it'll be, you know, look at the positives. We'll see, you know, what the repercussions of, I don't know, kids not getting exposed to, you know, germs more often. You know,
Right.
maybe we've eradicated. I don't know, what do they call it? Some of these, I'm not even getting into. I'm not going to go into kids stuff.
I feel you. I feel you. Now, you are if I have this right, physician, an entrepreneur, an investor. You have over 20 years of experience in healthcare related businesses. And you said you're originally from California. So how did you get your start, and how did it lead you to where you are today now with Backbone?
Yeah, it's actually, I would say I'm, people misconstrue it sometimes. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm actually a PhD in structural engineering.
Okay.
I got my PhD in 2012. It's a structural engineering. We're focused on the effects of bombs on buildings and structures. And so we were doing something called finite element analysis, which is kind of the typical, what we do for all structural analysis these days. We model things in the computer, we do things to them, see how they, what might happen to them in real life, go out, test them in real life, come back, revise the model. And so, yeah, we're working on kind of a lot of defensive work there. I spent a lot of time in Los Alamos lab working on some of our nuclear arsenal from the Cold War. And it was great to get paid for school. I learned a lot, get school paid for, and the government was fantastic. But I would say by the first year of my postdoc, I was definitely, it's not pleasant dinner conversations, I guess.
Sure.
And during that time, we'd also throw a lot of parties. I was a promoter, I guess is the word you could say, at the same time. And so we used to go to an event called Reggae on the River up in...
Dude, I love Reggae on the River.
Yeah, so that was
That's
kind of
what's
home
up.
base. That was home base growing up. Like we were like
Yeah,
slamming Sizzla in the dorms in Santa Barbara, screaming at everybody while we were going. And so, yeah, that was our kind of home base. And so 2009, 2010, they had some kind of community problems, a lot of greed because it was doing so well. And the festival shut down. It was pretty big. It was like 25,000 people in a small little area up at Piercy. And so that was our home base. And when the party wasn't happening anymore, it was kind of like, man, that's our jam. And so we had been doing parties, and we said, look, let's try and see if we can revive something up there. And so we went up, as my partner Andrew would say, we went on knocking on doors, which is something I highly recommend you don't do in Humboldt County, is go around knocking on doors.
Why? They weren't stoked about it?
I would just say in Humboldt County, you don't just go down to people's driveways, especially in the old cannabis industry.
Okay. I feel it. Yeah.
We found the property owner, and Keith, we talked to him, and he's like, okay, you guys know what you're getting yourselves into. And so we applied for a permit. And, you know, it was actually ended up being a very controversial, I think, Reggae. There was a lot, they called them the Reggae Wars. There was a lot of people who had a lot of heart and soul in building that event. And so to come into that kind of the lion's den, if you will, with a lot of history, we really kind of needed to prove ourselves. And so it was, you know, they need it, you know, up there, it's a small community, and the tourism money was a big thing for them for those events. And so we really tried to demonstrate that we can really bring a lot of revenue from tourism in there. And, you know, got that first year permit. I'd say, as any promoter, first year festival, we got our asses kicked a little bit that year. But we had a good, very intimate 600 person event that year. And it's just beautiful up there, man. And so we started to scale that. We partnered with Red Light Management, Core and Capshaw, and the guys who do they also support the Emerald Cup and a lot of other major events across the country. Very supportive on the cannabis front, and essentially started to kind of a lot of the local folks up there, like those events, especially when you were kind of in the shadows, right? You didn't necessarily talk about in public what you did. You couldn't. And so how you kind of identified yourself in the community up there is, hey, I am the vendor coordinator at Reggae on the River. I am the fence crew, right? That's who you were. That was your persona. And so I think it was year 2, year 3. Like a couple of the folks there, they're like, Peter, you need some help slamming some fence posts here. And so, they were stoked, right? For a ticket, they come down, hang out for 2 weeks, help us get the festival ready. We bring up a
Yeah.
bunch of cute girls from the city, and it's a good time. And so, we got to know each other really well. And ultimately, at that time, they just kind of started with those 215 zones, right? That you could have. It was medical. You had to have your Rex, and we played lightly with that a little bit the first couple of years, and that's when legalization really started to kind of become apparent. 2015, where look, there's this happening. Humboldt County, you had to apply early to say you're an existing grow. And so, they said, "Hey, Peter, you're getting these permits for this event in both. We straddle the county line, so I have to get permits in both counties." And so they're like, "Hey, Peter, you can do these permits. Can you help us get our weed permit?" So kind of started, said, "Sure, that sounds like an interesting project. Like, I'll help you get your weed permit." So I started digging in. And as a lot of consultants will tell you in the cannabis industry, when you're trying to consult for a permit, you end up consulting for the business, and then you end up consultant on every single part of it, because you're really standing up a business for the first time. I can't remember. I can't. I won't. One of the funniest moments. My buddy Ian and I were up there. Somehow he got in the mix, and we were sitting there like, shit. Like, how are we going to know what the inventory is? All right, well, let's run around and count all the plants. And our buddy Mac comes back, and he's like, "Peter, what the hell are you guys doing?" It's like, we're counting all the plants, dude. Like, we're trying to figure out what we're going to do here. He's like, "Dude, like, that's not like." Half of those are gonna like go away. Like, well, what are you guys doing? So it's kind of like that was no, but it's like kind of learning to understand, right, how this all works. And, fast forward a little bit, right? Started to get more and more permits. I did about 54 state licenses across the state for folks up and down the supply chain. Then kind of more. A lot of people started to get the tech industry, and a lot of people started to get interested in the hype. And so, yeah, you got to understand that there's been a lot of people in this industry for a long time, who have been doing this for a very long time. And so, first and foremost, I think anybody, especially myself and others who've kind of been able to be in positions like we are today, working in cannabis as it expands, right? We really comes from a lot of people who made a lot of sacrifices to get here. And so part of kind of the assisting those folks get their business standing up was things like inventory, being able to kind of provide some projections, understanding what's coming down the pipe. A lot of this was in folks' heads. And so it's kind of trying to wrap our heads around it. And as kind of legalization here in California started to come down the pipe, one of the kind of big things that we noticed really early on was once the weed leaves the farm, outside of a price point and maybe someone telling you your weed is fire, there wasn't much more information that you'd get back, where it went, what kind of products were created from it, etc. And so, if you think about the standpoint of, today, in today's age, if, someone grew some in a specific appellation, and that product and that strain and in that region really does well, for example, in a CO2 extraction. Well, no one was giving that information back to the farmer saying, "Hey, your specific way of growing and the strains that you have do really well downstream in these particular methods of creating different cannabis products." And so we just identified there was kind of this gap in the center of the supply chain in terms of traceability. And that really kind of stems also from kind of doing splits with manufacturers back in the day. If anyone listening is, you'd go ahead and you've got a bunch of trim, which, was waste for a long time. And you'd go ahead and say, well, I would like to produce some product out of this. If cash is not there, it's earlier in the season, then you do a split. So you drop off your trim, come back, a few weeks later, you'd get a jar back and a handshake promising you that was 50%. And that kind of started to kind of light bulb came on to say, like, how do I know that's 50%? I'm taking this guy's word for it. That's great. But kind of a little bit of more performance, kind of understanding how we could kind of maybe potentially see if we can assist manufacturers, processors, and some of these downstream producers in being able to kind of track some of this information. And so that's really where Backbone's kind of origin started, was identifying a hole. A lot of the softwares that are out there today are really cultivation oriented, because back in the day, what was the really fundamental was you had a medical license, you had a dispensary, and slowly someone would say, okay, well, I'll allow you to grow in the back of your warehouse as long as you tag all the plants. So no one really cared at that point what happened from harvest to final package good. And so that's really where, as you know, you have multiple and more people within the supply chain, we thought, okay, well, this could be a really good place to not only start investing, but also protect those investments. And so that's where Backbone was really born. We we partnered with our CEO Rajesh. He was head of analytics at a company called NetSuite. NetSuite, of course, is now Oracle's ERP solution. So he had wanted to do this 20 years ago at NetSuite. NetSuite had said, you know, the live data capture, kind of more manufacturing and processing oriented systems to kind of get more rich data sets. And, you know, they said, no, we're going to do that third party. So this really piqued his interest in something that he had always wanted to do anyway. And so we started down the path. And so for the past 2.5 years, we've been working with, you know, I have the luxury of saying some of Silicon Valley's finest on development of this product, but also at the same time having to teach all of them what a batter, a shatter, a butter, and all the cool things that we develop in this industry. So that's really where it started. And to date, we've been really just kind of word of mouth, spreading around really Northern California, as well as a lot of the industrial places, Adelanto, Desert Hot Springs, and a lot of the places where people are doing a lot of heavy duty extraction manufacturing, but at the same time, doing it for big brands because they've got capacity. It's being done in the right area, and it's been exciting. We've really kind of hit a niche, and now we're kind of ramping up marketing and really gotten our name out there in both cannabis and hemp.
So Backbone is a supply chain management platform that works with companies such as Cookies, Humboldt, and Life Elevated. Tell me more about what exactly Backbone does and what you specialize in.
There's kind of two strategies in software, right? Which is, I got an idea. Let me go ahead and market this idea, see how many people like it, and then I'm going to build it. I think people call that vaporware. We did the reverse where we just started building. And so we've been building, working with operators. Any operator who's ever talked to a technologist, I think you'll find that it's kind of like therapy. Is really what they're doing, right? Product folks, and they really want to understand the problem. And as we always say, the operator is the master of the problem. They are the expert of the problem. So rather than kind of coming in and saying, well, what's the solution, is no, like, understand the problem and the use cases. And so that's been the theme in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of people who are using Backbone, it's not just the software, is having a team to kind of hear you, if you will, has been kind of our stance. And so it's really resonated. We really end up really working our professional services team, and you know, everyone on the front of house side, we're all been in the industry. We've all been operators. We've been compliance people, and just kind of getting in there. And you know, that's been another big thing, is like, we used to touch and go to every single facility and kind of understand what's going on there, so they can touch, feel, and say, look, these are my physical problems. And a lot of people don't do that. It's a lot of overhead to do that. And we just kind of take that a little bit more seriously.
So I understand that you co-founded the Northern Lights Music Festival, which takes place up in NorCal every year in the summer since 2013 now. The event is unique in that it was the first festival ever to allow legal cannabis sales. So tell me about the journey to authoring the California Bill AB 2020 and getting it approved, and what that whole experience was like for you.
Yeah, it was right, like I was saying earlier, right on the border, Mendo Humboldt, on the old grounds of Reggae on the river. And so we obviously, last year we didn't have our event, but the year before, 2019, I'd been working with Martin Kaufman and Salwa Ibrahim. They were the founders of Bloom dispensary in Oakland. They've been around for just as long as a lot of folks in the Emerald Triangle in this industry, putting their neck out there. And both Salwa, Martin, and myself, I'd really wanted to see if we could do cannabis events outside of fairgrounds. When the regulations first came out here in California, they had this concept of cannabis temporary events. but they were only limited to fairgrounds because those were owned by the state. And so I figured the state was like, well, we're not going to push this on the local jurisdiction. So we co-wrote AB 2020, which was the bill that was passed that allowed cannabis events to go to private land as long as the local jurisdiction was ready to go. So I was working on Humboldt at the time. Saul was working on city of San Francisco. And so the summer of 2019, that got passed. And so at Northern Nights, we threw the very first cannabis event in California outside of a fairground, which was a trip. We called it the Tree Lounge. And it's a very, you're secluded to one little area. We tried to kind of make it very welcoming. And a festival is a festival, so things are happening all over the place. But to be able to have kind of retail sales of cannabis at a festival was very cool. Our event was only 8,000 people, and then 2 weeks later, we went ahead and did the same thing at Outside Lands for Grasslands for 80,000 people. So it was both were very, very cool. I think we really set a really amazing precedent to folks to be able to kind of continue to do that. There's a lot of nuances in Canada just because the regulations is not just like selling beer. So, and it's funny when you're talking to regulators too, on that sense, because it's kind of, no one knows what to do. Or like, well, you're selling alcohol over here, you're selling weed over here, and what's going on in between? And it's like, it's a festival. Like, well, so don't worry about it. I really hope that continues, and I think it will, right? Like Hall of Flowers and that team Rama has been doing a really good job. There's a lot of things going on there. And so I really do think that mainstream, and not in a bad way mainstream, but really bringing cannabis in. And, it's also interesting, right? People try to compare the sales, and it's like, you're not thinking about beer at an event, right? You're not necessarily restricted to one little area to buy beer. There's beer stands everywhere, right? And beer gardens around the event. And so I think that normalization of cannabis, especially in the event world, as you well know, cannabis and music have been intertwined since, however long you want to call those two, kind of the history of everything. And so really it's been, I'm really excited to see the next kind of iteration of that, especially when events are allowed to come back on, people can start gathering again, and seeing as, the rest of the country also adapts. We were talking to the folks out in the head of the Cannabis Commission out in Maryland and Massachusetts. They were also they were looking, and I think a couple of them came out to Grasslands to kind of check out what we're doing out here. And I think in California, going to set a precedent for cannabis events across the country.
Now, I'll ask you one more question before I let you go here, man. What do you have, or rather, what are you looking forward to the most to not only close out the year, close out 2020, but looking forward into 2021?
I think going into 2021, I'm looking forward to potentially setting 2021 up for success. Everyone being able to look back on 2020. It was very difficult for most, but I think everyone's got a little bit perspective. So I'm hoping that everyone can take the perspective and the lessons learned of the hamster wheel of all of these and take 2020 as a big learning lesson, so that 2021 we can kind of reset and get out there and do it in a way, in a little bit more meaningful, present, and sanitary way. And then thanks for everyone out there listening. Enjoy the holidays, and happy early New Year.
My thanks again to Dr. Peter Huson for joining me. If you are a member of the cannabis community and have a story you want to share with us, we would love to hear from you. You can reach the show at TRICHOMES.com. You can help others find the show by taking a moment to subscribe to the podcast and write a review. You can also join the discussion with industry insiders and get your voice heard by joining the community at TRICHOMES.com and following us on all social media. Hash It Out is produced by David Fortin and presented by TRICHOMES.com. I'm RJ Balde. Thanks for listening.